Let's try this again.
Okay.
So, tonight, after many technical difficulties and about a 25-minute delay in starting, which does in fact mirror the launch of the Disney Plus streaming service, we are here to present the first of what will hopefully be 8 episodes for season 1 of the Disney Plus series The Mandalorian, which picks up about, I heard somewhere it's 5 years after Jedi. Can that be confirmed or denied?
Yes.
Affirmative.
Okay. Was that mentioned in the show, or is that just like people online talking?
Yeah, some kind of synopsis online somewhere.
Okay. Now, does that count? Because I don't think that's fair.
Well, there's the official synopsis, which I do believe, when I attended the Star Wars Celebration last April, I do believe that that's what the timeline is.
Okay. So it's kind of this, from what I can tell, just based on the pilot, which I thought was pretty fantastic. It has definitely more of, and this has been said before, but a Western feel. You know, you've got the kind of lone, mysterious bounty hunter going into a town and collecting bounties, and then he gets a secret contact and gets a little bit more than he bargained for at the end of the episode. So I think at the outset, let's talk just kind of high-level thoughts on the thing, and then we'll get into spoilers after a couple of minutes.
Right.
Okay.
So, David, what did you think? Oh, you're frozen in Carbonite again. Mike, what did you think?
Okay, yeah, he is that's a great still of him, by the way. So you know what, I feel like they finally got Star Wars right. I'm the quintessential, I hated The Last Jedi Star Wars fanboy. Every critic disagrees with me on it. Whatever, it's fine. I have 90% of the film fan base to back me up. No, I'm kidding. If people like it, it's fine. But no, this is kind of like, this is made for people who grew up with Star Wars and for like kind of like who wanted to see a real sort of spin-off series. And this is something where you can see that money on the screen. You could just see just the production value is stunning. And the great thing about this character, unlike, maybe Jango Fett or something like that, or what they subsequently did with Boba Fett, is that, there's a lot of mystery behind, this isn't a spoiler, but there's a lot of mystery behind this guy that we're going to slowly find out throughout the series. And just the introduction that they give him alone, which is straight up like a Sergio Leone Dollars trilogy shot where he walks into the cantina, he starts messing up the place and he grabs his bounty. It's just so, oh God, it was great. I mean, just as a fan, I immediately was just screaming like a grown man child. Like, yes! Like, this is what I always wanted to see in the Star Wars. I sound like a stereotypical YouTuber right now. I sound like Jeremy Johns. But really, this is something that I think they really got what the fans wanted. I know they originally wanted to do a movie about Boba Fett that James Mangold would have directed, and Mangold always has sort of that Western sort of style in his work, and he would have been a fantastic choice. And they decided to do this series instead, and I think it was a great choice. I'm excited to see where the plot's going to go. The cinematography is fantastic. Some of the cinematography is a little too dark. It looked a little bit like the Han Solo movie where they were not properly backlighting some of the subjects. But overall, some of the lighting in some of the scenes is incredible, especially when he's just in the cockpit of his ship and you just get little pools of light on his helmet there. Just as someone who works in production, I was highly impressed by it. The use of miniatures and real sets, practical effects, to paraphrase that first Star Wars Celebration, or the Force Awakens Star Wars Celebration presentation was there. Now, there's not a lot in terms of depth to the characters, but this, which I heard was a problem with some people who reviewed it, but to me, it's like, this is the first episode. They're just introducing everything. And right, I think certainly with the cliffhanger at the end, they're going to provide some depth, and I'm extremely excited to see where it's going to go. And for once, I feel like this isn't like something like, for once, I'm looking at the Star Wars boards, and there's not a million crying fans who were suddenly silenced, to quote Obi-Wan and Dave earlier on.
Yeah, I agree. Now, it's funny. It'll be really interesting because this series is going to overlap The Rise of Skywalker.
Yeah.
Um, and though you might be in the minority of the quote unquote official critical community on Star Wars The Last Jedi, you're not in the minority of, I guess, Star Wars internet fan culture. Because there are a lot of people who are upset with that movie for a lot of
Man
different reasons.
child. No,
But I mean, I was someone who came out of The Last Jedi just enraptured. I loved what Ryan Johnson did with the, what's become a taboo phrase of subverting expectations. In the ensuing couple of years, I look back and the movie does have a lot of problems, and I understand why a lot of fans are upset. I still have a special place in my heart for the movie, but watching The Mandalorian, this really does feel like what I wanted out of Star Wars from the point of The Force Awakens. I
Mhm.
love The Force Awakens. Even though it's a carbon copy of New Hope, it's a shiny, fun carbon copy with some cool characters. Last Jedi might have been seen as a stumble because it just seems like a couple of days as opposed to, expanding this epic saga, right? But
Yeah,
with
yeah.
The Mandalorian, it really is revisiting the Star Wars universe, but taking us places that we haven't really been before with these characters, both in terms of the characters and also the literal geographic locations. When we open up on this planet, it's almost like he's in the middle of a snowstorm, but it also looks kind of like Mos Eisley, so it's like Mos Eisley in winter,
Yeah, it could
which
just be an outskirt of Hoth somewhere, you know? Yeah.
yeah. But then the scene the next day, I think he was still on the same planet, or had he left, where he
There's
goes
no
to
rock
see the
planet after that.
hmm?
Yeah. Or
What's
no,
that?
so like there a lot of the planets are like derivations of Mos Eisley and stuff like that, but they took a lot because they know there's a lot of weather elements and natural elements that, to create these new planets, they're all gonna kind of look like the same thing. You have snow, you have sand, you have water. So, there's not much you can do without it being a complete prequel CGI thing, which I will say in defense of the prequels, I did like how different each planet was. It's just that, you couldn't practically film those. But no, I absolutely agree with you with the look of it and visiting new parts of the universe that we didn't see before, but people wanted to see for a really long time, and they did it proper. Where like the Force Awakens, I thought it was a great Kickstarter to a franchise that was in a really damaged relationship, and they had to kind of like go back to the thing that they loved. And then I think again, where television is a writer's medium, which we'll see. Like Jon Favreau's an okay writer, maybe better writer than a director. I don't know. I mean, we saw The Lion King, that was, but
But
I,
he also did the Jungle Book, which I was a big fan of.
exactly, and he's made some really good movies. He did the first Iron,
Iron,
Man, which
yeah.
was fantastic. So I think this allows the writer to really develop a story, develop characters without being trapped, with having to contain something within a singular film, in a singular episode. And it's great to see, like, you can have filler space, you can have episodes. I mean, Breaking Bad even had like a random episode where everyone was trying to catch a fly, but it was still one of the greatest pieces of writing I've seen on television because they have time to develop that stuff. And here they're going to have time to develop this story in a live action manner. I haven't seen any of the cartoons, I'll admit that. So, but gosh, it was straight up Star Wars porn for me. So, and I think for a lot of people. So we got to see where it goes beyond the cool element of stuff. But yeah,
Yeah, I got the feeling that it was almost like a Fox pilot, in that they could air one episode, and even if it got canceled after one episode, it's still a really solid 40 minutes.
yeah.
I almost don't need more after this, but I'm looking forward to the fact that we're going to get more. And look who's been thought out and presented to Jabba at his palace. It is the returning champion, David Fowlie.
I am back.
So it's you didn't survive the first part of this Skype chat, but we are glad to have you.
Space like Carrie Fisher and landed back in our ship.
How dare
That's
you?
right. That's right. Yep. I was in the sick bay hanging out with the medical droid for LOM, and we just had a great conversation. And then I realized, whoa, I need to be back on air.
That's my favorite pastime, Bacta and Bacardi.
That's right.
So So nice the music box. Yeah, Mike and I were just kind of geeking out over how it's different from the Star Wars sequels that we've seen in the last couple of years. It really feels like it's kind of charting a new path. You know, Mike is over the moon about this thing. The Endor moon. I can't make a pun about that. I was really. What's that?
That's no small moon.
But I'm really enthusiastic about it. David, I want to know what you think.
I really enjoyed it. Let's see if I don't get cut off this time. Somebody doesn't want me to enjoy it.
We're saying good things, Disney. We're saying good things.
I know, right? Everybody's listening. We're getting paid to say good things, right?
Wait, we're getting paid?
We are?
Well, that's what everybody thinks, you know.
Oh, that's right. Disney Marvel apologists.
Yeah, we're a bunch of. This is the Three Shills episode, right? Yeah, I really liked it. This is what I've always wanted in this whole Disney thing and expanding the universe.
Talking about that, yeah.
This is what I wanted out of like something like Rogue One. This is what I wanted out of just, you know, so Rogue One and Solo couldn't help themselves. They just had to connect themselves somehow to the Skywalker saga.
Yeah.
This one really isn't, whatsoever. It's still connecting itself to the Star Wars universe if you are well versed in the Star Wars universe. And there's definitely a lot of geek out mentions and moments. But you could show this to anybody, and you know, if they have a proclivity towards, you know, science fiction or westerns or space fantasy, I think they'd dig it. I feel like this is like Ralph McQuarrie's designs coming to life.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like you know, you're taking the whole, you know, man with no name kind of, you know, traveling gunslinger, you know, gun for hire, timeless motif, and you know, bringing it into the Star Wars universe, and it's much in the same way the expanded universe in the novel form covered in the 90s when there was a Star Wars cinematic drought. You know, us geeks can go to the novels. There's Tales of the Bounty Hunters. There's the Mandalorian Armor series, and that's, you know, definitely what this feels like. Thank God there's no reference to a Skywalker or there's no license. I'm sorry, there's no lightsabers in this pilot episode. Hallelujah. And that's to me as a kid, that's what was always so cool about. Well, there's many things that was so cool about A New Hope as a kid, but that whole world building and even just walking into the cantina for the first time, it's like, who are these creatures and what's this whole underworld about, you know? And we got a little bit of that kind of in the prequels with the underbelly of Coruscant, but I really wanted to go back and branch out and see what kind of stories they could tell. And I'm impressed with what Jon Favreau is doing here. He's the showrunner, he's the writer of this episode, but I think the star here really is Dave Filoni, and he did an amazing job in the animated world and with the Star Wars Clone Wars and some other things as well. And this is some great live action work from him. I mean, just the editing, the story is like a great economic short. It is a pilot, you know, but it's a lot of, you know, Netflix and series pilots nowadays, they try and beef it up to about 60 minutes, but this is at about 45 minutes, and it's precise, it's right, it gets right to the point, it presents all its characters, it's very intriguing, and I'm hooked. It did its job.
Yeah, and you know, I love that you mentioned Ralph McQuarrie, because there's these kind of these still paintings, almost like concept art images that go over the end credits, and they're so in the style of the Ralph McQuarrie illustrations. I was like, did they dig him up to come back and do this or what?
I love it.
They're beautiful, and what I love about this show, and as I was kind of alluding to with Mike, if this were the only episode, I'd be totally fine. It's almost like now that we've got 7 more of these things, there's just more opportunities for it to go downhill and become disappointing. So I want to preserve this moment in amber, but it feels like the best kind of fan service, which is surprising coming from Disney, which you would think, their idea of big corporate fan service is like, oh, we'll throw in the lightsabers and we'll connect it to the Skywalker saga, as you're saying. But no,
Right.
it's like it's almost like they did a focus group of people who have been with and all about Star Wars for 40 plus years and said, how do we get this right? What do you want to see on this, in this series? And that focus group could have just been, Favreau and Filoni, a couple of
Right.
guys who are probably our contemporaries age-wise, thereabouts, who are diehards and they're filmmakers and they know what they want to see and they can make great stuff. And really go back to the roots with, there isn't a whole lot of noticeable garish CG. In this, it feels very much like they built sets and went places and had makeup and props, and it's beautiful and very funny. I was surprised by how much humor there is in it with the land speeder scene. The Mandalorian has a thing where he doesn't like droids, and you wonder, is this just kind of that Star Wars Outer Rim prejudice that we got hints of in A New Hope, or is there some like he had a really bad history with a robot at some point? But they don't go into this whole tortured backstory. They show his issues with little touches throughout this pilot, from the speeder interaction to his run-in with IG-11 in the end, voiced wonderfully by Taika Waititi.
I think there's a lot of we're left with a lot of scratching head moments and questions that usually I would be kind of maybe perturbed by, but I loved all these questions because it just made me want to. I know that a lot of this stuff is going to be revealed later on, and a lot of that stuff, I think it's playing towards the type of character that we're somewhat familiar with, this mysterious, drifter, loner. I liken the whole anti-droid stance of like, I thought of Indiana Jones and snakes. This is droids are his snakes. It's and for some reason, eventually found out why, Indy didn't like snakes, and maybe eventually we'll find out why this Mandalorian, or Mando as they call him for short, it doesn't like droids.
Now, be careful, because I got the feeling Mando was a slur.
It might be. Yeah, it might be.
Sounds a little. No, the great thing is, especially with the usage of humor, is that it wasn't overused like The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi did. Like, it knows how to balance its tone correctly. And this is a dark, gritty series that, as Dave pointed out, this is something where you don't even have to be a Star Wars fan to really enjoy it. I think anybody can just watch this and say, hey, that's really cool. What is that? And that can bring them into Star Wars. And that's a spectacular balancing act that, everyone involved on the team had to do. I do like how they had, and there's also like little nods to things, little references that only fans would get, but they're not overt. Like there is a line from the bounty that the Mandalorian was capturing where he said, well, I don't want to miss Life Day.
Yeah.
And then
I missed. I didn't get that joke.
Well, you know what Life Day is, right?
No.
Okay, so you need to find the Star Wars Holiday Special,
which I've never seen, for the record.
Well, you have to understand this whole thing ties really well to the Star Wars Holiday Special. As cheesy and as awful as it is, this is where the Star Wars Holiday Special is where a Mandalorian was first introduced. I mean, that's where we first got the animated version of Boba Fett.
Okay.
So
yeah, I knew that much. I've never seen it, so I didn't catch the reference.
So Life Day is a holiday that everybody is kind of. That's what the whole Star Wars Holiday Special kind of revolves around. It's supposed to be, instead of like it's like a holiday like Christmas or Hanukkah or something. Where I guess most people or creatures or beings in the Star Wars universe celebrate Life Day, but in this sense, in the 70s, that this terrible holiday special that is treasured by many geeks.
And just wants to personally destroy every copy
Right,
himself.
right. Yeah, there was a whole Life Day thing with like B. Arthur and Carrie Fisher singing and everything. Oh, it's great stuff. So he does reference Life Day. I was looking forward to Life Day. I was hoping to be around for Life Day, and that's when he's in the kind of the belly of the cruiser. The Mandalorian's ship, and he's looking at the carbon freezed bounty, and then that's when he mentions that. So that was a fun moment.
And also his gun, that's like a giant rod with the two ends, is the same weapon that Boba Fett used in the holiday special.
Which was based on Macquarie's drawings. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. So we have to thank the holiday special for the existence of Boba Fett in the series.
That's right.
So that survived canon. That was able to stay canon through the big Disney acquisition, but like all of the novels and comics from the 90s weren't. That's great.
You never know. You never know.
But I want to talk about the ship, because the ship is a hangover from the prequels. And what I loved about that is it's not just another Slave One type of thing, but the interior, when we get into the guts and we see the bounty that blue guild guy, not the guild guy, but the guy with the blue gills, whatever. He's kind of creeping around trying to find weapons or an escape. He comes across, as you mentioned, these racks of people frozen in carbonite, like the other bounties. Right. And I was thinking, it almost looked like, from what I remember, those ships in, I think, episode 2, those were like stormtrooper or cargo or carrier ships. I don't know if they were carrying battle droids, because I know those came out in these like racks, but it almost looked like they were repurposing these troop transport racks, kind of retrofitted to be carbonite slabs.
It could be, yeah, it could be. And I'm wondering though, because it made me think when I saw those carbon slabs. From all we know, Boba Fett was the first bounty hunter to actually use these, carbon slabs, because he needed something to transport Luke or capture Luke, and it was in Cloud City, and I don't know if maybe that was kind of like a legendary thing where like, hey, this is a thing that Boba Fett used to capture Han Solo, so the rest of the Mandalorians kind of picked up on that, and that's what they use from now on. I don't know.
Well. Also, I noticed it was a very quick carbon freeze, so you got the idea that he invented this thing kind of out of necessity on Cloud City, but then either he or someone else perfected it in the ensuing years, because now it's just like he shoves the guy against the thing and presses a button, and he's almost instantly freeze-dried.
Right. Yeah, and did you see the first creature that they showed when he was kind of like looking through the slabs was a Rhodian, Greedo's species.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, kind of funny. And the last guy was kind of bearded, and I'm like, oh man, is that Lucas? Never know.
Disney did that when he started putting in ideas they didn't like.
That's right. That's right.
Explore the world of the midichlorians. Get him in there.
Yeah. I really enjoyed once I watched it a couple times, then I looked at the cast and everything. And it was fun. Like his first bounty is a mithril, and I don't know if that's the name of the character or the species, but that character's played by Horatio Sanz. Okay. And it's funny once you actually watch it, again and again and again. You could see some of Horatio's mannerisms and stuff. But I love that. I love that whole scene that in the intro when he steps into that ice planet, and even like his first lines, like you could come with me warm or you could come with me cold. That it's just straight from like a Western. It's so good.
Yeah, the Sergio Leone influences and references are really great. This is how you pay homage to classic cinema. Without having a story like, I'm going to go on a Last Jedi rant. But
I noticed you still on your soapbox. What's going on here?
No, it's just my apartment, just me adjusting in my.
It looks like you're about to make a powerful speech. This is
like you were about to get up. I got it. Get up.
Well, no, it's like unlike the Last Jedi, where it's like, you know, they took like these references from like on the bridge of the River Kwai and stuff like that, where really the whole plot was just a spaceship chasing another one before it ran out of fuel and it was inconsequential. Here it's like these cinematic references contributes to the whole story. Although I did like the Kurosawa reference in Last Jedi. I will give Brian Johnson that. But here we really have a tight Western that is just so satisfying to see, just for anyone. I can't wait to see what they do with these characters. But again, it could shit the bed, like Ian said. And but hopefully,
one of the cool things about this chapter is like nothing really hits us over the head, and nothing is really. There's not really any moments of exposition or anything. It's just we're just dropped in and we're expected to kind of follow along, and it's
as the original Star Wars did. Yeah,
I mean, it's pretty easy to follow along. I mean, you know, there's a guild of bounty hunters, and apparently that's what this Mandalorian works in, and that's how he gets his money. And you know, he collects this first bounty, and then he goes to this other planet, and he lands in a very kind of Mos Eisley type of location. And he meets his handler, we assume, and that's a character played by Carl Weathers, Grief Karga.
Yeah, and you know, he kind of collects these the pucks, I think they call them. Is that the little discs that the hologram of the bounty comes up on?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And for the new charge, he's like, no, there's no puck for this one. It's all very you know, secretive and very sought after bounty. Yeah, there is a lot of dialogue, but it's the kind of dialogue that's not Basil exposition type of stuff. It's where you go back and watch it a couple of times. After you watch the episode all the way through, you kind of get into the rhythms of it and figure out the language that they're using. You know, they really thought about this whole world. The other thing I liked, Carl Weathers, Werner Herzog, Nick Nolte, they all show up as kind of guest characters, and I don't know if they're going to pop up throughout the series or if it was just a one and done for the pilot, but it wasn't just fan service and that, oh my god, it's Carl Weathers, remember he was in Predator and he was Apollo Creed, and, oh my god, it's Werner Herzog, a guy whose movies I'm supposed to know and like.
It's Action Jackson.
These are characters, and they're playing parts, and they're acting. I mean, Carl Weathers, he's not giving a bravura performance; it's rather understated. But I was like, where's this guy been? Like, I want to see him in more stuff.
Yeah, I think they're going to come back because there are parts in some of the trailers, some bits of dialogue from Werner Herzog that weren't in this episode, which I think will show up again. And again, he's the guy controlling the bounty. I suspect there's going to be a little bit of tension between him and the Mandalorian as time goes on. Yeah, I mean, the great thing is this is kind of, there's a little bit of cinephile influence here. I mean, where would you ever have guessed to see Werner Herzog in a Star Wars property? Never.
I mean, especially
because he was also in Jack Reacher. Come on.
He was in Jack Reacher, and he watches WrestleMania too and talks about that, actually.
Well, especially coming from a auteur who never has seen a Star Wars movie, and I would really be curious as to how they reeled him in and what the pitch was and what intrigued him, because he fits in perfectly, and I say that just because it's something different and new. He does fit into the Star Wars universe, but he's also different and new. And that's really what I was hoping for in a kind of like a standoff series or an expansion, if you will, of the Star Wars universe that we know. I wanted to see something, different and new. And yes, film critics, people who've been watching films for quite a while will know, oh wow, it's Werner Herzog, he's in this movie. But those who don't know him, and that's what I think. And that's what I think Herzog is getting a kick out of, possibly the fact that he's putting himself in this world where a lot of people will probably not know him, and that's cool. It's cool to see a guy like this just enjoy a role like this in a universe that's totally out of his, realm, our typical realm, but it's fun. I mean, he's being a cinephile and a fanboy, right?
Yeah. Well, the great thing is it matches his persona because Werner Herzog always has been sort of the independent sort of pirate on his own. As he says, you have to be a pirate when making a film. You have to steal the loot. And here, this matches perfectly for him because he is this outlaw. He
Right.
is this intimidating figure that you do not want to mess with. I mean,
Yeah.
just when he was talking, you could see him shaking, and I'm like, oh shit, and the great thing is, I think this will introduce people to some of his work, and this isn't something where it's not like The Force Awakens, where it was just blatant fan service. This is fan service, but it's also unique. It's its own thing, and it's something anybody can be brought into, and that's the great thing. It balances, I think, both aspects well, where the prequels introduced new things, but so many new things that some of the fan service things didn't work out, and where the sequels were all fan service and barely any new things. And then when they did bring in new things, some of it perhaps was a little too, let's say, adverting expectations for the sake of adverting expectations. Here, this is really balancing both things out perfectly, and I think this is sort of Disney's way of, because I think Disney, I don't know how faithful they are that this last Star Wars film was going to do, and I think this is kind of like their fallback plan in case that movie doesn't quite work out the way they think it will, kind of like how I don't think Last Jedi financially did what they quite expected it to, and I think this is sort of a way where we can expand upon the Star Wars universe. We can expand upon these stories, although they did get rid of the expanded universe, but we can do this on a more commercial level without the fans that can really bring more people in. And again, I think when they do introduce some new Star Wars movies, if Rise of Skywalker doesn't work out, people could maybe get reinstilled in their faith in the franchise rather than kind of being burnt out the way they have been for a while.
Yeah, and it's weird because they launched this streaming service with their flagship title, The Mandalorian. It's a Star Wars TV show that looks like you could go watch it in a movie theater.
Right.
I mean, it's a beautiful, unique looking, piece of art. And I almost wonder if Disney is shooting their future films in the foot because they've got everything on this Disney Plus service. Like all their movies are going to get, dumped straight there. And also the Fox titles are probably going to be coming there because of that acquisition, this year. So it's like if there's almost even less incentive to go out and spend money at the movie theater.
Yeah, it's like now I get the X-Men cartoon again.
Yeah. But I mean, I'm just saying, like, I don't know what it is, but it feels like a big screen experience, but it also feels right being able to sit and watch it, on a big screen TV.
Yeah, I agree. I was sitting there thinking, this would fit perfectly on a big screen, but it's also episodic enough where it feels like a series, like the start of a series, a TV series. And we're in kind of uncharted territory. I mean, for years they've been talking about a live action Star Wars TV show, and it just hasn't happened. And this was the best way to do it. Again, just by distancing itself from what we know, putting it in a time frame that is enough of a jump. I mean, we're going from the original trilogy, where it's basically in between the original trilogy and this new trilogy, and it's a cool time period too, because the Empire's been destroyed, it's been dismantled. Yet, wait, in this pilot, there's some stormtroopers, so that's very interesting too. I mean, the Mandalorian walks into this room where his client is played by Herzog, and he's surrounded. He's got some kind of a security detail that are armored stormtroopers. So are these stormtroopers just kind of, security for hire? Or are they just still kind of like working for the highest bidder as well? It's very interesting.
Well, there's also the kind of the wormy guy that's hanging out with Herzog's character, who's kind of giving him crap because the bounty, Herzog's like, yeah, we want him alive, but you can also bring him in or bring it in dead. And the guy's like, wait, that wasn't part of the plan. his outfit looked almost like what Krennic wore
Right.
in Rogue
Rogue-
One in the
Yeah.
earlier scenes, that kind of a white,
Right.
officer's uniform.
Right.
So yeah, there's plenty of possibilities here, and so much world building, even just in the outfits. There's
Yeah.
room for your imagination to run wild. Couple of things I want to talk about before we wrap it up is IG-11.
Uh-huh.
Uh, he, I imagine, was probably a CG character, or at least his actions were, but it was so fluid and cool and fun that I didn't notice it. And there was part of me who was thinking that I was watching a real robot
It could have been
shooting it.
Yeah.
in some shots,
Was that?
It could have been an animatronic in some shots.
If so, man.
The way it turns around and moves the arms, like I could see how someone could just take a remote and then do that.
Or speed it up in the camera too, yeah.
That's possible. I'm very curious about it because it did feel, like I said, it felt real to me watching it. But then there was part of me that's so used to seeing CGI in these kind of blockbuster efforts, especially from Disney, that I'm like, it's probably just in the computers, but it's really good. And it's funny, and we'll tiptoe into spoilers in the last part of this conversation. So if you don't want to know, and if you're one of the 3 people who are interested in Star Wars who have not watched the Mandalorian pilot yet, I implore you, please turn this off and come back next week.
47-minute mark. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Okay, but before we do that, let's talk just briefly about Nick Nolte.
Yes.
Okay.
I loved his character. Of all creatures, he's playing an Ugnaught, which is basically it's like kind of
Empire Strikes Back. Like,
from Cloud City, this kind of like pig snouted face, and I'm really curious. I know that IMDb lists another actor as an Ugnaught, and so I'm wondering if there's some crafty CGI or some kind of different, like, I don't know, cut and pasting here, where there's another actor like as this character's body. This character, he plays a character named Kuill, Kuill, and so he's kind of like somewhat of a moisture farmer or something like that on this other planet where the client's bounty is, and he helps out the Mandalorian, and he's just a quirky, fun character that Nolte. His voice is just spot on, but the creature's facial expressions and everything. You could see Nolte there. It's crazy.
It does look Nolte a bit, yeah.
Right, and
like
so it's just kind of perfect, and the whole setup is. It feels like, this guy who needs the Mandalorian's help, but can also help the Mandalorian too. Mm-hmm. So they're kind of helping each other, and that's it's another classic Western motif, on a hero's journey type of thing. And I hope he comes back, because I would love to see what else they do with him and what Nolte does with him too. But if it wasn't for this character, we wouldn't have that scene with IG-11 and the Mandalorian. So I feel like all these characters who are introduced are very important to what little plot we get, and they don't outwear their welcome, and it's just you want more time with them too.
Yeah, totally. And a couple of things. One, he introduces a catchphrase that my wife picked up on and said that she's going to use for the kids.
Oh yeah,
I have spoken. Which I fully intend to expect to see on Mandalorian T-shirts, like on the back or something.
Right.
The other thing is, as far as this nice little detail about he lives on this planet, and he's annoyed because there's all these people showing up, all these bounty hunters showing up and causing a ruckus trying to get at whatever is in that fortress. So it's like almost like the deadly version of tourist season. So he's very invested in helping this guy to hopefully be the one to get whatever is in that fortress out of there so he can go back to moisture farming in peace.
Yeah, and I like the idea of, what you just hit on is peace. There's something very interesting he says in kind of just one of the lines. He's like, everybody who lives here on this planet has come here to seek peace. Just kind of, not necessarily like living as a loner and seeking peace, but just to seek peace. And these guys are disrupting the peace. So I know you're a Mandalorian, and I've read about you, I've heard about you. So I think you can take care of this. So I like that idea. It seems really interesting about this planet of peace seekers.
Yeah, you really get the feeling that after this big conflict, like the entire galaxy is in a shambles politically and probably physically with downed ships, and we got a taste of that in The Force Awakens. But really to see them going out to getting as far away from as possible from the center of the conflict, and then still having remnants of the conflict come to them. You're right, David. It's like one or two lines of dialogue, but it opens up all these different possibilities for the viewer to make up their own mind about what has happened in the intervening years. I do want, so we talked a bit about IG-11, and since we're in spoiler territory, I was kind of bummed that I don't think he's going to be back.
Yeah.
But I thought he's going to be like the droid, like the sidekick, almost like the Chewbacca to the Mandalorian or something, following along and getting into trouble. But some of the promo art has another IG unit in it. So I don't know if that's just supposed to be IG-11. It was a big fake out to make you think he was going to be a bigger part of the series than he was, or if there's going to be more, or if he's going to pop up somehow, like he survived that shot to the head.
Well, luckily, the TV series, they can bring him back.
Right, and it could be another IG droid that's voiced by Taika.
Yeah. Now, the final thing I want to talk about, I'm going to open this up with a question, because it's my one criticism of the show that's not really a criticism. It just kind of bugged me. Did either of you watch Firefly?
No, but I heard it's very similar.
The end of the pilot of Firefly is identical to the end of the pilot of The Mandalorian.
Oh.
There's this piece of precious cargo that the renegade space pirate has been fighting over, and he finally opens it up. He's like, why is this thing so important? What is this? And in Firefly, it's a naked girl who ends up being a space weapon. And in this one, it's a little Yoda baby, whatever those things are called.
Thank God it wasn't naked.
He might have been. He was kind of in swaddling clothes.
Yeah, but you don't see. Anyways, yeah.
It was a nice surprise that I was impressed that they were able to keep that under wraps. And it's as far as the Firefly reference, I mean, there's kind of nothing new under the sun, right? Or suns, depending on what planet you're on. But
Firefly is a show that the fans of Star Wars, there's a lot of crossover there, so I feel like it wasn't so much a deep reference. It almost felt like, they kind of did it in Firefly. I don't know. It didn't feel like an homage. It felt like maybe we can get away with this. I'm like, you really can't.
When you watch that scene again, and this is another tribute to Filoni and his cinematographer and his editor. By the end of this pilot, we learn a lot about the Mandalorian. Mm-hmm. More so than I thought we would, and that's a testament to the storytellers and how they're packing in a lot into such a short amount of time. But he's not a ruthless killer, and we get a little bit about his past, and in flashback form, which we haven't talked about yet, and we get a little bit about his past, and I think it definitely plays into his decision towards the end of this episode here. And I really like that he even when he's working with IG, IG-11 was at the drop of a hat, like ready to self-destruct. But Mandalorian kept on saying, like, hold off on that. Whoa, we're gonna shoot our way out of here. Just stop. And I think it's not just that he didn't want to be within radius of a thermal detonator. It was just like, I think he has a thing about preserving life. And I think that although he is, this kind of quiet, man with no name type of, personality, there is something we get in this chapter. We get something. There's something more to him about, just kind of like how he views life and preserving life, and he sees value in a droid, but typically he would rather not work with droids, or would rather not be associated with droids. So it's very interesting how at the end of when IG-11 is just sitting there, he's like, "Oh, you're not so bad for a droid," and then later when he sees little Yoda or Yaddle or whatever their species is, he has a soft spot for him, and he doesn't shoot him, and that I like that. It's just these subtleties that we like. Okay, maybe he's not this ruthless killer,
And the greatest thing is they do all this with very minimal dialogue.
Right.
Show, don't tell me. Show.
Yeah, I mean, there's that last shot is him kind of reaching into the little, hovering cradle, and then the little Yoda guy kind of reaching out. And I think it cuts right before their fingers touch. It was almost like an
Michelangelo moment.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But you wonder, like, okay, is he going to? I would assume that part of this plot of this series, or at least this first season, is going to be him deciding not to take this back for the bounty. Mm-hmm. Because it's a baby, even though it's 50 years old. I love that little detail.
Right?
Or did it was 50? I don't know. Is it 50, or were they just saying it was 50?
It makes sense that he's 50, because I think when we first meet Yoda, isn't he like 800 years old or something?
I think, when he died in Jedi, he was like 900 and something.
Yeah.
And they mentioned the 50 years thing a couple of times, but they mention it in such a way that it's sneaky, that even when there's the big reveal, you're still not thinking, oh, it's 50 years old. It's probably a Yoda type person or a human character from the original trilogy.
Right.
But yeah, I just want to talk about this creature because it's so damned adorable. Again,
there's going to be a lot of plushie toys of him.
I watched it with my daughter, and she was like, "Aww."
That was same with me. You can probably hear the from space.
And then they almost shoot a baby in Star Wars. They were going to Anakin territory of killing children. I mean, luckily, they did it. We knew they weren't going to, but there was that second where you see the flash. Right? Holy shit.
That's what I mean. It's a great shot.
Yeah. Well, speaking of great shots, we're going to kill this episode and come back next week for episode 2 of The Mandalorian. I'm sure we'll be revisiting a lot of these themes and ideas, and hopefully with this much excitement, and probably about half the time. Technical issues aside, I think we did some good groundwork of figuring out what our histories are with Star Wars and kind of leading up to this show. But next week we'll do some straight recaps and see what the deal is. So thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
I have spoken.
By the way, Jeffrey Epstein didn't kill himself.
Oh, damn it! I was going to say that again. I was going to say Epstein didn't kill himself. I have spoken.
Am I supposed to say something like "Okay, Boomer" or something? I don't know.
Yes, sort of. But anyway, good night, Boomers.
I have spoken.